So welcome again to this session about the visualization of interactive network using Observable and D3.js. So in this first day, we are exploring a bit. During the first part, we see a bit the theory of how networks are constructed and a bit what is the theory underlying the interactive visualization of networks. And now in the second part of this first day, we will be analyzing how using Python we can fetch some data that has some relationships on it. We can analyze this information, we can visualize this information, and then we can export a file in a specific format that then we can import it to Observable, and using D3 we can visualize it into an interactive network. So as I was saying, I proposed to do these networks of co-autorships of musicians, and in this case I chose personally John Coltrane because it's a saxophonist that I like a lot. And we can see here now in Music Brains, which this is something that I was showing at the end of the last part, of the first part, that John Coltrane in 1957 made this release. In 1957 also released the famous album Blue Train, and so on and so forth. We can see here all the releases that he did during his lifetime. So the thing is that we're going to analyze all these different co-autorships in these specific releases. But before going on, I would like to explain a bit better one important concept that Music Brains does. So we have here all the albums. These albums are what is called release groups, because they were released in different years, and all these releases all together are what is the Music Brains names release group. So what is specifically a release? No, let me access now, for instance, to Tenor Conclave, which have, by the way, for artists which are Hank Mobley, Alcon, John Coltrane, and Zoot Sims, and we want to visualize all of these collaborations, all of these co-autorships, how they collaborated between them to create this specific album. So as I was saying, each of these albums is a set of releases, and a release is actually, we have one album and it was released in Japan, for instance, in 1957, in US in 1958, in South Africa in 1959, for instance. And all of these different releases is information that actually now in analyzing co-authorship we are not interested, because this album is a result of the collaboration of these four musicians that I said before. So we don't want to analyze the different releases, but we want to analyze the release group. So the abstraction of all these releases that makes the album, that is the result of the collaboration of these four musicians. So now let's go into Python. Let's put all of this into practice, and let's see how we can build these networks, and we can analyze these relationships, and then finally create these files that we use to visualize the network interactively. So at this point, you should have this Python notebook. I will ask Albert to share it with you, because I would like you to play along with this video. I would like you to play with this, to run all these different cells, to really understand what's going on. And in case there's something is not clear, you can make some questions. I will leave some minutes at the beginning of the next sessions to make some questions about how this Python code works, and if you have any doubt, that we can comment this code if you have any doubt. And in any case, as I said before, in the Observable notebook that I shared with you, you can find my email address, and you can send me any doubt that you have. So I'm going to run JupyterLab, and let's deal into this. So as I was saying, we're interested in analyzing these release groups, this which actually conceptually is nothing else than an album as we normally think about it. And the first thing that, of course, then we have any Python notebook is to load all the different packages that we need. I am loading request, I am loading pandas, numpy. I'm also loading the Python JSON, and from this time I will loading sleep, and in a moment I will explain you why. Here I included also the description of the release group, which I've just mentioned. So what we're going to do, as I was saying at the first part, we are going to use the API of Music Brains, which is this online program which allows a machine to ask some information and to retrieve some data, in this case in JSON format. And using the JSON format, it will contain all these albums. It will contain all the information about these albums, which music brain actually names as release group. Okay, a release group is our way to understand albums, and in the way that as I said before. So what we're doing here is we're asking to the API, to the, as we can see here, to the second version of the music brain's API. We are asking for the different release groups, and then we are asking for a specific artist. As you can see here, we're asking this artist, and this is a way to specify a parameter to the API. And here in artist, you can see here that I'm saying, okay, I'm going to insert this value. And what is this value? Is the music brand ID that I was talking to you at the beginning, at the end, sorry, of the first part. So I'm asking to, okay, give me this information from this artist, include all the artist credits, and this is fundamental. I'm asking to this API that I want all this information. I want to, for each of the albums, I want the API to retrieve all the artist information from the database. Then offset to 0, limit to 100. In a moment we will talk about this. And also I'm asking that I want the data in JSON format. Okay, so again, let's say that you're interested in John Coltrane, as am I, and here you can find the music brand's ID. I just copy it, I went to this code and I copied here the music brands representing the musician that I'm interested on. So if I execute this, I'm using the request package. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but request allows us to make petitions using HTTP protocol to any sort of URL that there is in internet, and we are asking for a get. Specifically can be HTTP protocol can have a get or a post petition. In this case is a get, and we are asking for this URL with this specific music brand's ID parameter and all these different configurations that I just explained. So I just execute this, and let's see if, okay, it's a request 200. For those who are not familiar, a request HTTP 200, it means that is okay success, which means that the request has succeeded. So we retrieve something. Maybe it's not what we are interested, but the petition worked because actually we this actually means that we are using the correct configuration. So the API was able to understand each of the parameters that we asked were correctly formatted. So actually the API is able to correctly understand it, and thus we expect that the API is giving us the information that we want. So let's analyze first what we have. Okay, it seems that we have a JSON file, a JSON data object, that it has three keys. The first one is release group count, and this means, I can tell you already, this means that this musician during all his lifetime he released a number of different albums. The release group count is 357 in the case of John Coltrane. In a moment we will see what it is. Then we can also get this offset. This offset is the number in which we are starting the petition. So the thing is that we have here a database, the music brains database, which contains all the different albums that John Coltrane produced during his lifetime, okay? And they are ordered in an index form from 0 to 356, or from 1 to 357, which are all these releases from John Coltrane. And the thing is that the API is establishing a limit of releases that we can ask in a single time. This limit is 100, okay? And this is the reason why I established here this limit of 100, because it's the limit that the API is establishing to me. So I cannot ask more than this 100. So if we know that, for instance, John Coltrane released 357 releases, probably he released more, but in the database these are the releases that we can ask for. So what we have to do is ask 100 by 100, moving from 100 to 200, then 200 to 300, and finally 300 to 357, in order to retrieve all these 357 releases group. When I say releases, we should think about releases group. Okay, I just say release for brevity, or maybe we should talk about albums because it's the way that we understand it. Okay, so here I ask from 0 to 100 in JSON format for this specific musician that is John Coltrane. So let's now, as I said, 357 for this value, all the albums, the number that we're starting, and in release group we have all the information for these first 100 albums that I just asked to the API. Okay, so I'm going to load for you one specific album information. Here we have it. In a moment we will explore it. There is no panic mode. Okay, in a moment we will see what is in here. And then I'm going to plot for you this information, but for all the release groups. So see here, I'm taking now the key release group, and I am trying to transform it into a pandas data frame. And I do this using this Json Normalize function, which personally I found it really convenient. And what this does is it takes a JSON and it converts it to a pandas. And here we have it. You see, we have 100 rows, which each of these rows represents each of the albums that Music Brains have in these first 100 albums of the 357 that are available in the database. Each of the rows represents one of these albums. Something important, artist credit. If you remember, I said before that I asked for the artist credit, and here we have it. Each of these cells contain a JSON, another JSON, so this is a nested JSON of all the information that these albums have in terms of the artists that participate on it. And now, I want you to have this clear. You can see it now. I'm asking now for the release group count, 357. This is the maximum number of albums that we can fetch from the API. Which is the offset? The offset is 0 because I started in 0. In pseudocode nomenclature, this will mean I equal to 0, step 100. Then we will ask for 100 to step 100 again, 200, finally 300 to 357. Okay, I really hope this is clear. In case it's not, just play with it. You will see that this is the way it works. Okay? Now, let's continue. Let's build two functions. Okay, here I created these two functions in order to simplify this process. The first one, what it's giving to us is the total number of albums that are available in the Music Brain database. And the second one, it simply returns for this group of 100 albums, it returns the data frame. So if you check it carefully, you will see that this code here is the same one that we need to run this line, and this code here is nothing else than the code that I need to run this line. Okay, this one, and of course those lines that are in previous lines. Okay, so actually it's just the same that we did until here. We asked for the data for the 100 first albums, then I'm also asking for the total albums that this musician published, and then I export it in this specific function here. You see, 355. Well, this is a mystery that I won't solve right now. I'm not completely sure why there are two missing. And then again, in the next one, okay, this is something I will check, and if needed, I will comment you in the next class. But probably it's due to some limitation in the database or some mismatch in the database. But in any case, the second function is if we provide one offset. So, and remember that the limit is 100. So the offset has to be 100, 200, 300, 400, and so on and so forth. So here I'm asking for 300 from 300 onwards in the database position to 300 more. Sorry, I haven't run the function. So here we have it. Now, I said to you that we have 357 albums from John Coltrane. If we're starting to this list in the position 300, we get from 300 to 334. Okay, so here we have it. We have now all these different albums, and we have all these functions that allow us to know all the total number of releases, and we have another one that, given an offset, so a point in the database, it will give us all the different albums until reaching 100, which is the limit. Since we have 354, then we cannot ask more than that. Okay, I hope this is clear at this point, because now what we're going to do is recursively ask for all these different data. Okay, so this is why I built here this recursive this iterative, this recursive list. Okay, and what I'm doing is okay, let build me an numpy range from 0 to that number, the total number of albums that actually this musician released. So from 0 to 355, step 100. So actually I can show you, which is I think it's more or less clear, but let me show you. Okay, so this is the offsets. Offset 0 to 100, offset 100 to 200, 200 to 300, and 300 to 400, but they're not 400, so it will be 300 to 355, and this is really important. Okay, so I'm asking for these different offsets, and then I'm placing these offsets in the second one, which this function will be retrieving this album from 0 to 100, 100 to 200, and so on and so forth, until retrieving all these different albums that will be all of them listed in this specific array, and then what I'm doing in this slide is concatenating all these pandas data frames one after the other until having this whole data frame with all the albums from John Coltrane. Okay, I'm going to load this. Okay, here we have it. Let me print for you one of these. Let me print you the result first of all. Okay, here we have it. Now we have the 355 albums that we were talking. And now what we want, as I was saying before to you, we ask for this artist credit, and this is the key part, okay? In this artist credit, as we can see here, we can gather all the information that we need. Sorry, yeah. So from this artist information, artist credit, okay? We are seeing here the album number 5, and I'm showing to you the artist credit, okay? And we see that in this album, in index 5, we can see that there is this first artist. You see, there is this list of dictionaries, and each of these dictionaries contain the information of one of the artists. For instance, this first artist on this album, we see that this the name is Jolivet. And then in artists, we can gather more information. We have some information about disambiguation, and we have here, you see, this part, this key is returning the value of the name. It's codified, but this is not a problem. This is really not a problem. Afterwards, we will this won't appear later in the network. So the thing is that for each of these dictionaries, we have this artist key, and this artist is another dictionary which we can also gather the name. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking this dictionary that contains this data frame that contains in each of the rows one album, and in each of these albums, remember that we have this artist credit that contains this list of dictionaries containing the information of the artist. And what I'm doing is I create a new column, and then I iterate for these dictionaries for each of these albums, and then I'm saying, okay, artist dictionary, do you contain a key that is called artist? So do you see here, it contains this key artist. If it's true, then what I'm doing is I'm taking this artist dictionary that I know that contains an artist key, and then I'm asking for the name. Okay, so, and this I'm doing iteratively for all these different all these different dictionaries in this list, that each of these elements on this list, all of these dictionaries, are each of the artists that participated in this album. And this is key because by doing so, what we take, and now I'm seeing albums from 10 to 16 positions in index, we see that, for instance, album 10, Hank Mobley, Al John Coltrane, and Zoot Sims, that maybe is familiar to you, these authors at this moment, actually are the 4 artists that participated in this specific album. Okay, I hope it's clear. I hope it can be a bit complicated, but this is the idea. This is what we are doing. I invite you to check this code, to think of it properly. What is this JSON and how I'm transforming each of this to get what actually is what we want now, okay? Which is this data frame that each row contains now the artist information in this JSON, and at the end, it contains this column, which contains the different artists that participated in this album by comma separated in a list. Now let's continue. You have it here. Okay, so now it's time to build networks, and I want to make really brief a sort of introduction to networks. I know that at this point you're a bit familiar with NetworkX and with Pandas and with NumPy, but even though I would like to make a really short introduction. There are 3 types of graph in NetworkX. The first one is an undirected simple, which is called a graph, so it's an undirected network. Another one is a directed simple, which is called the graph, so it's a simple network, but the edges have some directionality from the source to the target nodes. And then we also have the multigraph and multi-digraph, which the multigraph is an undirected graph, which actually have multiple types of edges. For instance, in this case, we can be mapping not only if 2 artists collaborated when releasing an album, but also if they collaborated in a live concert. And a multi-directed graph would be the same, but in this case, the multiple type of object will be also directed. Well, in this case, it is the simplest case. We want an undirected because collaboration doesn't have any directionality. Collaboration is some sort of equal or horizontal process in this case, and it's not a multigraph because we only want to codify one type of edge. In this case, collaborations in albums. Okay, now I created this network X graph, and in this class we will be adding nodes. We will explore more ways, but we mainly will be adding nodes by using this function we just called addEdgesFrom, which have the following parameters. It asks for a event, which is a list of tuples. Sorry, I don't know how that is pronounced in English, tuples. And these tuples, I guess, contains the node target and the node source for each of the different edges that we are adding in the network. There are other attributes. I will not explore them right now, but I invite you to read them if you have time. Then now let's create a really simple chart. I would like to make it really clear, like this really simple type of chart. Okay, what we're mapping now is I'm creating a network of collaboration in books. Okay, so let's say that we have a first book in which we have 3 authors, 1, 2, and 3, really simple names. And if the book is authored by these 3 authors, it means that the author 1 collaborated with 2, the author 1 collaborated with author 3, and the author 2 collaborated with author 3, because all of them collaborated, and these are all the possible collaborations that 3 authors can collaborate. Okay, in mathematical language, this is called a combination. We will see it in a moment. So what I'm doing is creating a new graph. I'm adding edges from this list of tuples in which we have collaboration with 1 with 2, 1 with 3, 2 with 3. So these 3 authors collaborated to create this book. Now let's add another book to the graph in which we have that author 1 co-authored another book with author 4, which actually is not in the network. Let's create this chart. Here we have it. Author 1 now collaborated also with author 4. So in this chart, in this network, in this moment, we are seeing 2 books, in which one with the result of the collaboration of these 3 authors, and you can see this is this triangle is representing all the potential collaborations that these 3 authors can have, and another book in which author 1 and 4 collaborated together to create it. As I was saying, what is if we have this book authors, in which let's say that we have this book book 1 author is 1, 2, 3. How we transform from 1 to 3 to this list of tuples? To do this, and as I said, we will be using the mathematical construct of combinations. Okay, and we can use this library which is called itertools, and specifically these function combinations. And we specify that we have these 3 authors, 1, 2, 3, and we want to create all the combinations combining 2 potential two element combinations. Okay, so what does exactly mean? That we have 2 element combinations. We want all the potential combinations having 2 elements, and here we have it. These are all the potential collaborations that we can have when an author is when a book is authored by 3 authors. Okay, in this case 1, 2, 3. What if we have another author? This is what we have. These are all the potential collaborations that we have if we have 4 authors. I invite you to think about this, to spend a bit of time. It is not clear to me, to you, sorry, and also to play with it, play this combination, add another author here, and maybe create this network with 4, with 5 authors, and see how these networks evolve as we add more authors and as we add more books. Okay. Now, it's time to continue. Now it's time to do this same thing that we are doing now for books, to do it with the authors with the artists that participated in an album. So remember, we had this. Now we had this artist credit in Json. We transform it to this list of artists that participated in this release group or in this album. So let's see something. I mean, if we say this, we have a list of authors, and actually it's pretty much the same that the thing that we had here. We had the 3 artists, and these 3 artists actually were the artists of the book. In this case, we asked for this paired collaborations, all the potential combinations when they're paired collaborations, and they are paired. If it's not obvious, it's because the edges are just mapping two collaborations, is connecting two nodes. That's why they have to be paired, because the relations are paired between nodes when we are talking about collaboration. Okay, so we have exactly the same. So what we are going to do is create all these different iterations for each of these albums, for these paired combinations of artists in each of these different albums. Okay, so let's do this. Let's create this chart for all these different albums. So the first things that we do is we create a network's undirected graph. Okay, now for I'm asking for this artist column here. Now I'm asking for all a list. What I'm doing here is transform this to a list of lists. Okay, you see, I have an array and a list of the different. This is conceptually a list of the list of authors in each of these different albums. Okay, now this is iterating for for each of the list of authors in each of the albums. I'm asking for, is there collaboration in this album? If there is collaboration, then there should be in this list of artists, there should be more than one artist. In case there is not, I will say just, okay, add me this node in the network, this isolated node, which actually in most cases will be John Coltrane, of course, because in a lot of his albums actually he did not collaborate with anyone to create the album. Okay, but in many others, of course, he did. Then in case we have collaboration, so the longitude of this array of artists is bigger than one, what I'm doing is I create the combination of these artists. So what I'm doing is this thing here for the artists that I have in this list, and then what I'm saying is add me this combination of artists to the add edges from. This structure that we see here, sorry, I don't want to move it. This structure that we see here is exactly the same one that we see here, here, in which was the combination of the authors of the book. Now we're exactly doing the same. We're doing the combination of the different artists that participated on this album, pairs combinations, because we are trying to create all these paired combinations, because edges can only codify binary relations. Okay, then we add the edges. When it is isolated, we add these nodes, and then we create this network. We have it. I'm also plotting here the number of nodes and the number of edges. So we have 61 nodes. So we have 61 collaborators of John Coltrane throughout all his life that are and a network that has 169 links. So all these collaborations result to 169 relationships. I use matplotlib to create a new figure. I establish this canvas size, and then I draw using networks this network, and I'm also asking to include the labels to the network because I want to see these names. Here we have it. Okay, this is the first time we see this. We have John Coltrane in the center. I mean, it's not surprising because it is the artist that we want to understand, which is his collaboration. And then we have all the collaboration within all the different artists during his lifetime. For instance, we see probably the structure that we see here is a specific that collaboration in one album, but probably this one is in several albums. Thelonious Monk, here we see that with Miles Davis, probably this was one album. Then with Thelonious Monk, probably he also did this second collaboration, and so on and forth. So, for instance, Miles Davis also, he collaborated here with probably in different albums in these cases, but also it seems that John Coltrane collaborated with Miles Davis and Conan von Adderley in this other album. Okay, I let you spend some time. I especially, as I was saying, invite you to search for different artists that you like, and then that you, in case you know with other musicians that these artists collaborated, then it will be more interesting to you, because then you will be able to interpret on the fly the network. Okay, now let's jump to this beast that I added here. Okay, what I'm doing here is I'm showing here two other ways to build this collaboration network. The first one is using a pandas edge list. Okay, so to build it with a pandas edge list, the first thing that we have to do is filter only those albums in which there is collaboration, because edge list in the case of networks only accepts items that contains collaboration. So I'm filtering only those albums that have collaboration. And then this is the key line. I'm going to to plot this line. Of course, I'm going to run this one. Okay, and now let me show you this line. What I'm doing here is I'm creating this. I'm creating a list of data frames, which each of these data frames contains an edge list. Okay, an edge list is nothing else than this. An edge list is a list of the different edges that there will be in our network. And you see, since this is an album that contains lots of collaborations, so this is actually the representation of the different combinations to pair combinations, pair relationships that can be in an album that contains all these artists. You see, so since there is all these artists in this album, we see that André Jovillet collaborated with all these people to create this artist, but also him also collaborated with all these people to create this album, but also him collaborated with all these people to create this album, and so on and so forth. And I'm doing this, I'm creating this edge list for each of the albums that we have in our in our data frame. Okay. Now, when we have this, I'm concatenating all these data frames in one single data frame, and this data frame here contains all the edge lists of all the albums in our data frame of John Coltrane. And we have just to specify this data frame of edge list. We just send it to Networks through this from Pandas edge list, and then we have it. 61 nodes, 169 edges, and we have the network. And then the second one, from Pandas adjacency. Okay, I want to show you all this method is really interesting. Is using an adjacency matrix. Okay, and in order to do this one, we first need to define an empty Pandas data frame that will represent our adjacency matrix. Okay, and to build it, I'm creating an empty Pandas data frame. So I'm creating an empty matrix full of 0 that has in all of the columns all of the names of the different nodes on the network, and in all of the rows, all of the columns, and in all of the rows, it contains all of the nodes names in our network. So let me show to you. Now it will be also filled, but at the beginning this is full of 0, and then we see that we have a symmetric matrix containing in the columns all of the nodes of the network, and in all of the rows it contains all of the nodes in the network. Okay, and now what I'm doing is, for each of the artists in each of the albums, I'm slicing this matrix and I'm adding +1. I'm adding 1 to all these pieces of the different pieces that represent the artists that were collaborating in each of the albums of that Coltrane released during his lifetime. Okay, if we did this iteratively, recursively, we're going to get this adjacency data frame that we see here, and now what we can do is add it to our network by using this function, network from Pandas adjacency. We include it here, we create the network, and here we have it. But what happened? There's a problem. Now we have 61 nodes, but we have 230 edges. And this is happening because actually, if we look at this matrix, we see that actually the diagonal is not 0. And it is not 0 because when we are adding here, John Coltrane collaborated also with himself conceptually in an album. But actually, when we are building the network, we are not interested in visualizing this self collaboration. So we can also include this function here that we are asking Networks to remove all the edges that actually are self loops in this network that we have just created. And by doing so, now we have 169 edges. Okay, this could be a bit dense. Happily you have this video, so you have time to explore it and see how it works. And if you have any doubt, as I said, we can comment it in the next session, or you can send me an email. Okay, and now we are reaching the end. Here I created this function. This function, what it does is it just creates the network in one single function. So it's just a summarizing function, let's say. And I mean, you provide, you see here, you provide a music branch ID, and it returns the graph. Okay, I'm going to load it. Now I include for you this dictionary in case you want to play with some musicians that they were quite active during their lifetime. So actually they had like a fruitful collaborations. So I think that they are interested. In this case, as I said, I'm plotting John Coltrane. So I'm using this dictionary returns me the music brains ID of John Coltrane. I'm using this function that, as I said, is just a summary of everything that we did before, and I give this function the music brains ID, and then it returns me the network of this specific musician, and then I'm plotting it using the same functions that we did before. And we can be sure that it's correct because we have 61 nodes and 169 edges. And now, the final point. We build the network in Network X, we analyze the structure, we even see different mechanisms to build this network in Network X. And now finally, we have to export the file, as I was saying at the beginning, that we can import it to our observable notebook, and that actually we can use it to plot it interactively. Here we have, this is a structure that is given by the specification of D3. It is not important that actually you understand it. It's just a standard format that D3 establishes, so I'm just replicating it here. And this line, what it's doing is creating an output directory. In case you don't have it, it will automatically detect. If you don't have it, it will automatically create it. And if in case you have it, it will just leave it there. And finally, what we will do is, given this structure that I just created, it will just export this file following this specific format for the network that we have created here. In this case, as I said, the one that maps the collaboration in album releases from John Coltrane. Okay, you see, I just created this network, this folder, and in this folder we have this specific structure that contains one JSON file. By the way, I think I haven't said it. This is a JSON file that contains nodes, all information of each of the nodes on the network, and all the links with all these structures, source and target. These two guys were connected once, all these two, and so on and so forth, for all of the links that map this collaboration between these different actors. Okay, and I should stop here. I took more time than expected, but there's a lot to say, and I think it's important that at least I cover all of this. I'm sorry because I know I was fast, but I have a strong time constraint and I didn't want to make it too long, okay? But at this point, you should be able at least to run this code. If you have any problem, again, contact me. And the final objective is that you are able to replicate this specific folder by John Coltrane or by any other musician. And it should be as easy as placing the music brains ID in this specific function, and then it should be able to give you the network X object, and by using this object, then loading this cell, you should be able to export this JSON file, and this is the JSON file that we will use afterwards to plot this network in network using D3 and observable notebooks. So I'm going to stop here. I'm looking forward to seeing you and knowing you and meeting you the 21st of May, and to using this file to build the network. I think it will be fun and fine. And it will be a bit dense, I have to warn you. Last year it was too long. I'm trying to make it a bit shorter, but in any case it will be dense, but it will be, I think, quite interesting to you how to transform this static, and we can see here the limitation. We cannot see properly the labels. We want to move, we want to play with this net, we want to be able to explore it properly. We will be see how to do this interactively next week. So looking forward to meeting you next week, and thank you for your attention.